Black girl cries in basement cage, until police arrive and the truth is revealed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It's a cold, dark evening, and the air is thick with tension. The basement is silent, save for the soft sound of a girl sobbing. Her cries echo through the cold, concrete walls, but no one is there to hear. She's trapped in a small, damp cage. Her only company the shadows that seem to press in on her from all sides. The flicker of a distant light above is the only sign of life, a world she can no longer touch. Her name is Maya. She's only 10, but already her innocence has been ripped away. She didn't know what she did wrong. Only that one night, she found herself locked away like an animal, forgotten by those who should have protected her. Her thin arms tremble as she pulls her knees close, curling into a ball for warmth. Her stomach growls with hunger, but she has nothing to eat. Her tears stain her cheeks, but no one comes to comfort her. She whispers to herself, a soft promise that she'll survive. She has to. Maya doesn't know how long she's been here. Days, weeks, time seems to blend together in the darkness. Every sound makes her flinch. The creak of the floorboards above, the distant thud of a door slamming shut. But then, she hears something different, a faint ringing sound, like the buzz of a phone. It's coming from the hallway. Her heart skips a beat. Could it be someone coming for her? She holds her breath, her small body trembling as she listens. The sound grows louder, and her hope flares briefly before it crashes. The ringing stops, and the silence returns. She closes her eyes, sinking back into despair, but then she hears something else. Voices. The door creaks open, the heavy sound of boots on the floor. She doesn't dare to look up. Maybe this is another nightmare. But then, a voice cuts through the silence, firm and clear. Is anyone down here? Maya's heart pounds in her chest as the door swings open wider. She can barely see through the bars of the cage, but a silhouette stands in the doorway. A man's voice, sharp and commanding, follows. We've got a call. We're here to help. Maya blinks, unsure if she's dreaming. But the voice doesn't go away. The door to the cage unlocks with a loud click, and the metal bars swing open. The man reaches out to her, his hand gentle but strong. You're safe now, he says. The truth is about to come to light, and Maya's journey is just beginning. I can't believe it's real, Maya thought as she stared up at the man in front of her. The light from the hallway illuminated his face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt something other than fear. She looked into his eyes, and for a moment, she saw compassion, not judgment. He crouched down in front of her, his voice soft but commanding. You're safe now. We're here to help. Her heart skipped a beat. Was he really going to help her? She had heard voices before, but they were always empty promises, never real. She had learned not to trust anyone, but something in his tone made her believe. The man reached out slowly, his hand gentle as it extended toward the cage door. Maya hesitated. Her entire body screamed at her to stay hidden, to protect herself. She had been hurt too many times before. But the warmth in his voice, the sincerity, made her lower her guard just a little. She looked at his hand, then up at his face, and for the first time, she took a deep breath. Slowly, she moved toward him, the cold concrete floor pressing against her bare feet. She didn't know what would happen next, but she couldn't stay locked in that cage anymore. As soon as she stepped out of the cage, the man helped her up, his grip steady. Let's get you out of here, he said, his voice firm but kind. Maya nodded, too exhausted to speak. She didn't want to cry in front of him. She didn't want to seem weak. But everything inside her was screaming for comfort. She needed it. More than anything. The man led her down the dimly lit hallway, where the air was cold but had a sense of freedom. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the silence, and Maya's eyes flickered to the walls as they passed. Her whole life had been confined to the darkness, the four walls that had caged her body and soul. Now, for the first time, she was stepping into the light. As they reached the front door of the house, Maya's eyes went wide. She saw the flashing lights of police cars outside, their red and blue lights illuminating the street. It was like something out of a movie, something she had only seen in dreams. The man stopped for a moment, turning to face her. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Maya nodded again, her throat tight. "I'm not sure," she whispered. "I never thought someone would come for me." The man gave her a reassuring smile, though his eyes were filled with concern. "We're not going to let anything happen to you." He turned back to the door, pulling it open and stepping outside. The chill of the night air hit Maya's face, and for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. The police were everywhere, and she could see them talking to people outside. Officers were moving in and out of the house, and the flashing lights reflected off the snow that had started to fall. The man guided her toward a car, where a female officer waited by the door. The officer looked at Maya with a look of kindness, as if she understood what this moment meant. "I'm Officer Jackson," the woman said, her voice calm and warm. "We're going to make sure you're okay." Maya nodded, feeling a small sense of relief. It wasn't over. This was only the beginning. But for the first time, Maya didn't feel alone. The man who had helped her smiled at her once more before turning to the officer. "Take care of her," he said, his voice serious. Officer Jackson gave a small nod, then gently guided Maya into the back seat of the car. As the car door closed, Maya looked out the window, her heart still racing. She watched as the man walked away, his figure growing smaller in the distance. But something inside her told her that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew she wouldn't be forgotten again. The car started moving, and as it drove away from the house, Maya leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. It was hard to believe she was free. The road stretched out ahead of her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the promise of something better. It was a promise she was willing to hold on to. "I was safe." The thought repeated in Maya's head as she sat in the back of the police car, looking out at the snow-covered street. The warmth from the heater made her feel heavy, like her body had finally relaxed after so many days of living in fear. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. She had escaped, but she wasn't sure what would come next. The police car turned a corner, and the lights from the house grew smaller in the distance. Maya's heart tightened again, a mixture of fear and hope gnawing at her insides. "Where are we going?" she finally whispered to Officer Jackson, who was sitting in the front seat. The officer turned slightly, offering a gentle smile. "We're taking you to a safe place, Maya. You'll be looked after there." Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure what that meant. She wasn't sure where safe even was. She had never felt truly safe. The car drove on, and Maya gazed out the window. Her thoughts drifted to the man who had helped her earlier. He hadn't said much, but his kindness had been enough to convince her that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. She wondered who he was, why he was there, and why he cared. "Do you know him?" Maya asked hesitantly. Officer Jackson glanced back at her. "You mean the man who helped you?" Maya nodded. "No," the officer replied softly. "But he was just doing his job. Sometimes, people like him see something they can't ignore. They want to make sure you're safe." Maya didn't fully understand, but she felt a small sense of gratitude. She was no longer in that basement, locked in that cage. She was on her way to somewhere else. Somewhere that could be different. As the car made its way through the quiet streets, Officer Jackson turned the wheel and pulled into a parking lot. The building was large but seemed peaceful, with soft lights glowing in the windows. Maya could see the shadows of people moving behind the blinds, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone. The officer parked the car, and Maya hesitated for a moment, taking in the unfamiliar sight. "Is this where I'll stay?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Officer Jackson said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "This is a safe house. You'll be able to rest here, talk to someone about what happened, and get the help you need." The thought of talking to someone made Maya anxious. She had never told anyone what had happened to her, not in detail. She had learned not to trust. She had learned to keep her pain buried deep inside. But now, things were different. She had to trust. She had no other choice. The officer stepped out of the car and came around to open the door for Maya. The cold air hit her face, but it wasn't as biting as it had been in the basement. She stepped out of the car, her legs shaky, but she stood tall. She could do this. "You ready?" Officer Jackson asked, her voice warm but steady. Maya hesitated, then nodded. "I think so." They walked toward the entrance of the building, the door opening with a soft click as they approached. Inside, the lights were bright and welcoming. A woman in a comfortable sweater smiled as they entered. "Hello, Maya." I'm Sarah. You're safe now. Maya felt a slight relief as the woman's smile seemed genuine. She led them through a hallway, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. The walls were painted a soft, calming color, and Maya couldn't help but notice the small details. The framed pictures on the walls, the cozy furniture in the rooms, the quiet hum of an air conditioning unit in the distance. It was all so normal. It felt so different from what she had known. They stopped outside a door. Sarah opened it, revealing a small but cozy room. A bed was made with clean sheets, and there was a dresser with a few things already set out. The room felt warm and inviting. "This is your room for now," Sarah said gently. "You can stay here as long as you need." Maya stepped inside, looking around. She could hardly believe it. She had a room. She had a bed. She wasn't in a cage. It was real. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt the weight of everything begin to lift off her shoulders. Sarah smiled kindly and stepped back, giving Maya space. "I'll leave you to get settled. If you need anything, just let me know." Maya nodded, her throat tight, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. She didn't know how to express what she was feeling. The door closed softly behind Sarah, and Maya stood alone in the room. She walked over to the bed, sitting down slowly. She touched the soft sheets, the clean fabric feeling foreign against her skin. It had been so long since she had felt anything like this. The silence in the room was comforting, but at the same time, it felt overwhelming. Her thoughts raced as she sat there, trying to process everything that had happened. The basement, the cage, the man who had helped her, the car ride, the safe house. It was all so much, but for the first time, Maya didn't feel trapped. She wasn't locked away. She wasn't alone. She wasn't forgotten. She was free. She had no idea what would come next, but she knew that, somehow, she would be okay. "I don't know how long I've been here," Maya thought, staring out the window of the small room. The snow had stopped falling, leaving behind a white, quiet world outside. She sat on the bed, her fingers nervously tracing the edges of the sheet. Everything felt different now. The fear she had lived with for so long had faded, but it left an emptiness she didn't know how to fill. The silence was almost overwhelming. No more shouting, no more dark corners, no more cages. Just silence. And freedom. She still couldn't fully believe it. Just a few days ago, she had been locked in a basement, her world a tiny cage. Now, she was in a warm room, with soft sheets and light streaming through the window. But the quiet felt strange, like something was missing. Her mind kept drifting back to the man who had helped her. She didn't even know his name, but he had saved her. He had been the one to break through the darkness and offer her a way out. Maya couldn't stop thinking about him. What would happen to him? Would he be all right? Would he come back? Maya didn't even know if he was still around. She hadn't seen him after they left the house, but his voice was still in her head. His words had been simple. "You're safe now." She wanted to believe him, but she was scared that, just like everything else in her life, this, too, might disappear. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up, startled. "Maya." It was Officer Jackson's voice. "Are you all right?" Maya nodded, standing up and walking slowly to the door. She opened it, and the officer smiled warmly. "How are you feeling?" she asked, stepping inside. Maya shrugged. She didn't know how to answer that question. How was she supposed to feel? "I'm okay," Maya said quietly, but her voice betrayed her. "I'm just not used to being okay." Officer Jackson nodded, her expression understanding. "I get that. It's going to take time. But you're safe here, Maya. And you're not alone." Maya looked at the officer, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know how to trust anyone anymore," she whispered. Officer Jackson knelt down to her level, her gaze soft and kind. "I understand. But you don't have to trust everyone all at once. You can take your time." She paused, then added, "But I want you to know that we're here for you. We'll help you through this. You don't have to go through this alone." Maya wiped her eyes quickly, trying to hold back the tears. She hadn't let herself cry in so long. But now, in the safety of this room, the floodgates were threatening to open. "Thank you," Maya whispered. Officer Jackson smiled gently. "It's my job, and it's the right thing to do." She stood up, giving Maya a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "I'll let you rest for now, but we'll talk more tomorrow. If you need anything, just ask." Maya nodded again, watching as the officer left the room. She was alone once more, but the loneliness felt different now. She wasn't trapped. She wasn't in danger. She had a chance. For the first time in a long time, Maya allowed herself to sit down on the bed, her body sinking into the softness of the mattress. She closed her eyes and breathed in the stillness. It wasn't the same as before. The fear was still there, lingering at the edges of her mind, but it wasn't the overwhelming, suffocating fear that had controlled her every thought for so long. It was different. It was quieter. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Maya allowed herself to imagine a future. A future where she didn't have to hide. A future where she didn't have to be afraid. The thought was strange, almost foreign, but it was there. And for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. She was safe. And maybe, just maybe, she could begin to heal. The next morning, Maya was woken by the soft sound of knocking at the door. She blinked and rubbed her eyes, still not fully accustomed to the peacefulness around her. Maya, Officer Jackson's voice called again. It's time to get up. We have some things to talk about. Maya sat up, stretching, and took a deep breath. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew she had to face whatever came next. She walked to the door and opened it, finding Officer Jackson standing outside, along with a woman she didn't recognize. Good morning, Maya, the woman said, offering a warm smile. My name is Sarah. I'm going to be working with you. Maya glanced at Officer Jackson, who nodded reassuringly. Sarah works with us here. She's someone you can trust. Maya hesitated, but something in Sarah's kind eyes made her take a small step forward. Hi, Maya said quietly. Sarah smiled. Hi, Maya. I'm really glad you're here. We're going to take things slow, but I think you'll be okay. We'll help you find your voice again. Maya looked between the two women, feeling a flicker of hope in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely lost. Maybe this could be the start of something new. A chance to finally be free. I'm not sure how long I've been here. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers brushing the soft fabric of the blanket. It felt strange to be in a place that was so quiet, so peaceful, so completely different from the darkness she had known for so long. The room was small but comfortable. There was a soft chair in the corner, a small lamp beside the bed, and the faint scent of clean linens in the air. She had never imagined a place like this. She had been in worse situations before, places with no light, no warmth, no hope. But this was something entirely new, and she wasn't sure what to do with it. After years of living in fear, of hiding from the world, how was she supposed to act in a place where no one was trying to hurt her, where no one was watching her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake? It felt wrong. She felt like a stranger to herself. Maya stood up and walked over to the small window, staring out at the street below. It was a clear morning, and the sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow over everything. For a moment, she allowed herself to take it all in. The sky, the trees, the people walking on the sidewalk. It was all so different, so normal. But she wasn't sure if she was ready for normal. She wasn't sure if she would ever be able to feel like she belonged in a world that had been so unkind to her. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Maya, are you up? It was Officer Jackson's voice. Maya turned away from the window and walked over to the door, opening it slowly. The officer stood there with a warm smile, her presence calm and reassuring. Good morning, Officer Jackson said, stepping inside. How are you feeling today? Maya hesitated, her mind still racing. I don't know, she said quietly. It's all so different. The officer nodded, her expression understanding. I can imagine. It's a lot to adjust to. But remember, you're not alone in this. You don't have to figure it all out right away. Maya nodded but didn't say anything. She wasn't sure how to explain what she was feeling. How could she explain the weight of all the years she had spent trapped in a world of fear and pain? How could she explain the emptiness she felt now that she was free? I know it's hard, Maya, Officer Jackson continued, but you're stronger than you realize. And we're going to take it one step at a time. We're here to help you through it. And you don't have to do it alone. Maya looked at her for a moment, the officer's words slowly sinking in. She had heard the words before, but they had never felt real. Not until now. Maya didn't feel like she deserved the help, the safety, the kindness that was being offered. She didn't know how to accept it. But maybe, just maybe, she could learn. Do you want to go downstairs for breakfast? Officer Jackson asked gently. Maya nodded. She wasn't hungry, not really, but she didn't want to stay alone in the room any longer. She needed to find a way to adjust, to take the next step. The officer led her downstairs to a small dining area where a woman in a blue sweater was setting the table. She looked up when they entered, her face softening into a welcoming smile. "Good morning, Maya. I'm Sarah. I hope you're doing okay." Maya nodded, feeling a little shy. Sarah motioned for her to sit at the table, and Maya did, the chair creaking under her as she lowered herself onto it. Sarah placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of her, along with a glass of orange juice. "I'm not a great cook," Sarah said, "but I hope you like it." Maya picked up her fork, her hands trembling slightly. She took a small bite of the eggs, the warmth filling her mouth. It was the first real meal she had eaten in days. It tasted like comfort, like something normal, something she could get used to. Maya glanced up at Officer Jackson, who was watching her with a quiet, understanding gaze. "I'm not used to this," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "To having food. A bed. People who care." The officer nodded. "I know. It's a lot to take in, but we're going to help you adjust. One step at a time." Maya didn't say anything more. She didn't know what to say. She had always kept her feelings locked away, buried deep inside. She had never let anyone see her fear, her pain, her anger. But here, in this place, she felt like maybe she didn't have to hide anymore. Maybe, just maybe, she could start to heal. Maya finished her breakfast in silence, her thoughts drifting. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt a small spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. "I know I should feel safe," Maya thought as she stood by the window in her new room. The world outside was bright, but everything still felt distant, unreal. She wasn't used to freedom. She wasn't used to not looking over her shoulder. She had lived in fear for so long, not just of physical harm, but of being abandoned, of being forgotten. It was strange, almost suffocating, to be in a place where no one was shouting at her, where no one was telling her she didn't belong. Officer Jackson had been right when she said it would take time. But Maya wasn't sure if she was ready for all of this. She had spent so many years being invisible, slipping under the radar, not drawing attention to herself, that now, in this new, bright world, she felt exposed. "I don't belong here," she whispered to herself, looking out at the people walking by below, moving with their busy lives. They had their families, their routines, their safety. Maya had never had any of that. She had always been alone. And now, the thought of being part of something, of having a place, seemed overwhelming. A soft knock on the door pulled Maya from her thoughts. She turned and walked slowly to the door, hesitating before opening it. It was Officer Jackson again, her presence steady and familiar. "Hey there," she said with a gentle smile. "How's it going?" Maya shrugged, her eyes downcast. "I don't know. Everything feels so different. I don't know how to act." Officer Jackson stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I get it," she said, her tone soft but firm. "This is a lot to take in, but you don't have to figure it out all at once. You're doing great, Maya. It's okay to feel lost sometimes." Maya looked up, meeting the officer's eyes for the first time that morning. There was no judgment there, just understanding. Maya had spent so long hiding from people, pretending she didn't need anyone, that the idea of letting someone help her felt strange, almost wrong. But in Officer Jackson's eyes, she didn't see pity. She saw compassion, and that made all the difference. I don't know what to do with myself," Maya admitted quietly. "I don't know how to trust." Officer Jackson nodded, taking a seat on the chair by the bed. "Trust takes time," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "And it's okay if you're not ready to trust everyone right now. But you've got people here who want to help you. And when you're ready, we'll be here to listen." Maya didn't know if she was ready, but the officer's words gave her a tiny bit of comfort. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she wasn't completely alone. She had spent so many years just surviving, and now, she had to learn how to live. It wasn't going to be easy, but maybe it was possible. "Do you want to talk about what happened?" Officer Jackson asked, her voice gentle. Maya shook her head. "Not yet," she whispered. "I don't even know where to start." The officer nodded. "That's okay. There's no rush. When you're ready, we can talk. But right now, I think it might help to just breathe. Let yourself take a break from everything." Maya nodded, the weight of the officer's words settling on her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe without the constant fear, without the pressure of being watched. "I don't know what comes next," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. but I don't want to go back to the way things were. Officer Jackson gave her a reassuring smile. You don't have to go back to that. You're here now, Maya, and this is a new beginning. It won't be easy, but you don't have to do it alone. Maya's heart ached at the thought of everything she had lost, of the years she had spent hiding, alone. But there was something else now, something she hadn't felt before. A flicker of hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. Officer Jackson stood up, walking over to the door. I'll be around, Maya, she said. If you need anything, you know where to find me. And you're not alone here. We'll figure this out together. Maya watched as the officer left the room, the door closing softly behind her. She was alone again, but this time, it felt different. She wasn't trapped. She wasn't forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, she could start to believe that things could be different. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. She could find a place for herself in this world. A place where she didn't have to hide. A place where she could belong. I thought I was starting to understand how to breathe in this new life, but then I heard that name again. It wasn't spoken aloud, not by anyone around me, but I heard it in my mind, like a whisper in the dark that refused to leave. Dimitri. The name echoed through my thoughts, rattling like chains. I had been living in this safe house for a week now, starting to get used to the kindness around me. But there was something lurking just out of sight. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It had been quiet, almost too quiet. Everyone had been kind. Officer Jackson checked in regularly, and Sarah made sure I had everything I needed. There were days when I could almost forget about the past, when I could pretend I had a future that didn't come with shadows hanging over it. But then, just when I thought I might have a chance to forget, I heard the name. Dimitri. It was impossible to ignore. I wasn't ready to face the truth, not yet. But the name dragged me back into a past I couldn't outrun. I had to know more. One evening, after dinner, I found myself standing in front of the small desk in my room, staring at the file that had been left on the table. It was thick, a stack of papers with my name on the front, and though I had seen it before, I had never opened it. But tonight, something was different. Something was pushing me to find out what was inside. I slowly sat down and opened the file. The first page was a basic form with my name, age, and a few details I had already known. But then, as I flipped through the pages, my eyes landed on a photograph. It was a grainy image, but I could see enough. Dimitri. There he was, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. The man was older, graying at the temples, but it was the look in his eyes that struck me. There was something cold about it. The picture was old, worn at the edges, but it felt like a weight pressing down on me. I could feel my heart racing, the room suddenly too small. My breath caught in my chest, and I had to force myself to keep reading. The file revealed more, documents showing that Dimitri was somehow connected to the family I had never known. There were names, dates, and places I didn't understand, but one thing was clear. Dimitri was a part of my past. The past I had been running from. My head was spinning as I set the file down, but the name wouldn't leave me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know who he was. I had to know why he was in my life, why his name was tied to my future. But as much as I wanted to find answers, a part of me was terrified. I wasn't sure I was ready to confront the past, to face the people who had hurt me. But it was out there now. Dimitri's name, his face, the connection between us. It was impossible to ignore. The door to my room creaked open, pulling me out of my thoughts. I turned to see Officer Jackson standing in the doorway, her expression soft but serious. Maya, are you all right? She asked, stepping into the room. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure if I was. I was just looking at some things. She glanced at the file on the desk, and then back at me. What's in there? Some things I don't understand, I whispered, my voice barely audible. She walked over and sat down next to me. You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready. But I want you to know that whatever it is, we're here to help you. You're not alone in this. I swallowed hard, trying to push the lump in my throat away. I know, I said softly. But I don't know if I can trust anyone with this. It's too big, too. I trailed off, unable to find the words. Officer Jackson didn't say anything at first, just sat next to me, her presence quiet and comforting. After a few moments, she spoke again. Maya, you don't have to face this alone. If you want answers, we'll help you get them. But you don't have to rush. Take your time. Her words were like a balm, soothing the raw fear in my chest. But the truth was still there, gnawing at me. Dimitri. His name wouldn't leave me, and I knew that I couldn't outrun it forever. I looked at Officer Jackson, her steady gaze meeting mine. I need to find out who he is, I said, my voice trembling. She nodded. We'll figure it out together. Whenever you're ready. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep pretending that the past didn't matter. I couldn't keep hiding from the truth. I had to know what Dimitri's role was in all of this, what part of my life he had taken. And maybe, just maybe, in finding him, I would find the answers I had been running from. For the first time, I felt like I was taking control of my own story. The fear still clung to me, but it wasn't as suffocating as it had been. I wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, I could face the past and move forward. Dimitri's name was no longer just a whisper. It was a challenge, and I was ready to face it. I didn't sleep much that night. The events from earlier, the file, the name, Dimitri, kept replaying in my mind like an endless loop. Every time I closed my eyes, his face, the unfamiliar man from the photo, would flash before me. It felt like I was drowning in questions. What was his connection to me? Why had his name been hidden from me for so long? And why now? Why was this coming up when I thought I had finally found a moment of peace? The soft light of the early morning filtered through the curtains as I sat on the bed, staring at the floor, my thoughts tangled in knots. I had to find out more. But how? I wasn't sure where to begin, but I knew that ignoring it was no longer an option. The fear that had once been constant now felt like a shadow I could not escape. I had to confront it. I had to find out who Dimitri really was. The knock on my door broke my train of thought. I looked up to see Officer Jackson standing there, her face kind but serious. Maya, can we talk? She asked. I nodded, unsure of what to say. She stepped inside and sat on the chair by the window, her gaze steady on me. How are you doing? She asked gently, her voice warm, as though she understood how complicated everything had become. I took a deep breath, looking away. I don't know, I whispered. It's all so much. Officer Jackson didn't press, just sat there, waiting. There's something I need to know, I said after a long pause. She leaned forward, her attention fully on me. What is it, Maya? His name. Dimitri, I said, the name coming out like a weight. I need to understand why he's in my life. Officer Jackson's expression softened, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't speak at first, and for a moment, the silence between us stretched out, thick with the unspoken. I know it's hard to trust, but whatever it is, you're not alone in this, she said finally. If you want to look into it, I can help. But it's going to take time, Maya. And I need you to be ready for whatever we might find. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I knew I had no choice. I want to know who he is, I said quietly. I want to know everything. Officer Jackson stood and walked over to the desk where the file was still sitting. She looked at it for a moment before turning back to me. We'll start from the beginning, she said. But we have to do this carefully. If you want to go down this path, we can't rush it. We'll take it one step at a time. She hesitated, then added, I know you've been through a lot, Maya, but I want you to know that you're safe now. Whatever happens next, we're going to make sure you're protected. I didn't know if that would be enough, but it was a start. I wasn't sure what I was looking for or what I would find, but I had to see it through. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Officer Jackson nodded. Let's get to work then. She made a few calls, and the next few days became a blur of paperwork and investigations. I had to answer questions, relive parts of my past that I wasn't ready to confront, but I didn't have a choice. Dimitri's name hung over everything, a shadow that I couldn't shake. Each day, Officer Jackson would come by, sit with me, and go over what they'd found. It was slow going, and the uncertainty was maddening, but I couldn't stop. I had to know. Then, one afternoon, Officer Jackson arrived at the safe house with a stack of documents. I could see the weight of the situation in her eyes as she sat down across from me. Maya, she began, her voice gentle but firm. I think we've uncovered something important. My heart raced, but I stayed silent, waiting. We found a connection between Dimitri and your family, she continued. It's not clear yet what role he played, but we've traced his name back to some key people in your mother's past. People who were involved with some dangerous people. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. I had always known that my family's history wasn't simple, but this was something else. What does that mean? I asked, my voice trembling. It means that Dimitri is more involved than we thought, Officer Jackson replied. But we're still piecing it together. There's a lot of history here. It's going to take some time. I nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. What had I gotten myself into? Can you tell me more? I asked, desperate for answers. Not yet, she said, her voice steady. We need to make sure we have everything before we move forward. But know this, Maya, we'll get to the bottom of it. Whatever happens, we'll make sure you're safe. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure what I felt anymore. Relief, fear, hope, uncertainty, they all mixed together. But one thing was clear. I was finally starting to uncover the truth. And whatever it was, I wasn't going to let it destroy me. The past had always controlled me, but now, I was in control of it. And that was something I could hold on to. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart hammering in my chest. The past few days had felt like a whirlwind. Everything was moving so fast, and yet, nothing seemed to make sense. Dimitri's name haunted me like a ghost, a shadow that I couldn't outrun, no matter how hard I tried. Officer Jackson had been working tirelessly, digging deeper into my family's past, uncovering connections I had never known existed. But with every new piece of information, the weight on my chest grew heavier. I had been told that the truth would set me free, but all it seemed to do was bind me tighter. The truth about Dimitri, about the people connected to my family, was starting to surface. The deeper we went, the more dangerous it seemed. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this, but I had no choice. I couldn't go back to the life I had before. I couldn't go back to being invisible, to living in fear. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. It was late one evening when Officer Jackson arrived at the safe house with another stack of papers. She looked worn, her usual calm demeanor tinged with the exhaustion of working nonstop. She sat down across from me, placing the papers on the table. Maya, we've uncovered something important, she said, her voice low. I could tell by the way she spoke that this wasn't going to be easy. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the papers, waiting for her to continue. What is it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We found a connection between your family and a powerful criminal organization, Officer Jackson said, her words hanging in the air like a cloud of smoke. My stomach dropped, and I felt the room spin around me. A criminal organization? My family. This was worse than I had imagined. Dimitri is tied to them. He's not just some random figure in your past. He's been involved with them for years. My breath caught in my throat. What does that mean? It means that Dimitri is not just someone from your past, she continued. He's been involved in illegal activities for a long time. Your family's name has been linked to these people in more ways than we realized. I could feel my heart beating faster now, my palms sweating. The pieces were falling into place, but I wasn't sure I liked what I saw. Are we talking about my mom? I asked, the question hanging in the air. Officer Jackson nodded, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Your mother was connected to them in some way, yes. But it's more complicated than that. Dimitri had a role in some of the things she was involved in. I felt like I was suffocating. The room seemed to close in around me, and I had to force myself to breathe. This was too much. Too many secrets, too many lies. What now? I asked, my voice shaky. Officer Jackson stood up, walking over to the window. She stared out at the night, the silence between us stretching out. We need to get to the bottom of this. We need to know everything about what your mother was involved in and how Dimitri fits into it all. But I need you to be careful, Maya. This goes deeper than we thought. There are people who will stop at nothing to keep these things buried. I nodded, though I didn't know what to say. I was terrified, but I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. I had come this far, and there was no turning back now. I'm ready, I said, my voice more confident than I felt. Officer Jackson turned back to me, her expression softening. You don't have to do this alone. We'll help you every step of the way. I nodded again, the weight of the situation settling over me. I wasn't sure what I was about to uncover, but I knew it was going to change everything. I didn't know if I was ready to face the truth, but I had to. I had to know who Dimitri really was and what he had to do with my family. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and more papers. Officer Jackson had brought in a team of investigators to help, and together, they began piecing together the truth about my family's involvement with Dimitri and the criminal organization. The more I learned, the more I wished I hadn't asked. But there was no going back. I had to keep going. I couldn't stop now. I spent hours going over documents, photographs, and old records, each one revealing more secrets, more lies. Every time I thought I understood what had happened, something new would surface, something darker, more dangerous. The truth was messy, complicated, and it scared me. But I couldn't run from it anymore. Dimitri's name was everywhere, like a thread that had been woven into the fabric of my family's history. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't escape it. And neither could they. I knew that Dimitri wasn't the only one involved. There were other people, other names that kept popping up in connection with my family. But Dimitri was the key to it all. As the investigation deepened, I realized that the man who had helped me, the man who had come into my life and set everything in motion, was not just a figure from my past. He was part of something far bigger, something I didn't fully understand. But I was starting to. And soon, I would know everything. I didn't know what to expect anymore. After all the revelations, the secrets that had been buried for so long, everything felt like a blur. The investigation was moving faster now, but the more we uncovered, the more I realized how deep this went. The connections to Dimitri, to the criminal network tied to my family, it was all so much. I had been just a girl, trapped in a cycle I didn't understand. But now I knew. I knew I was part of something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. Officer Jackson had been by my side the whole time, helping me piece things together. She had been the one to sit with me when the truth started spilling out, holding my hand when I couldn't bear to look at it any longer. But I couldn't turn back now. I had asked for the truth, and there was no unseeing what I had learned. The days that followed were full of meetings with investigators, talking to people who had known my family, digging through more files and photographs. Every new lead felt like a step forward, but the fear of what we might uncover next never left me. One afternoon, Officer Jackson called me into her office. She looked tired, like the weight of the case was starting to get to her. But there was something else in her eyes too. Something that made my heart race. "Maya," she began, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We found something." I walked into the room, and she handed me a folder. It was thick, filled with papers I hadn't seen before. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tight. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "We've been tracking Dimitri's movements, and we found a connection to a property your family owned." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "A property?" "Yes. It's not far from here, but we didn't think it was connected until now." She opened the folder and showed me a map with a marked location. My eyes widened as I stared at it. "That place," I said, my voice trailing off. I recognized it immediately. It was an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town. I had seen it once, a long time ago, but I hadn't thought about it since. It wasn't even a place I had ever been, but somehow, seeing it there, on that map, tied it to everything that had been happening. "Dimitri has been there," Officer Jackson said, pointing to the location on the map. "And according to our sources, he's been coming and going regularly." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "Why? We don't know yet. But this house, it has ties to your family's past. It's a place we need to investigate further. It could be where everything started." My heart was pounding in my chest. The pieces were falling into place, but it didn't make any sense. "What does this have to do with Dimitri?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We don't know exactly. But he's involved, Maya. There's more to him than you realize." I looked at the map again, my fingers tracing the lines of the location. It felt like a door I had never opened, a place I had never thought about, but now it was pulling me in. I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to face whatever might be waiting for me. But I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend like it didn't matter. Officer Jackson stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Maya, I know this is a lot to take in, but we're getting closer. We'll do this together, okay? You don't have to face this alone." I nodded, but it didn't feel like enough. I wasn't sure I was ready to confront this, to walk into that house and face the truth about my family. But there was no turning back now. "I'm ready," I said, though I didn't feel ready at all. Officer Jackson nodded, her eyes soft but filled with determination. "Let's get some rest tonight," she said. "We'll head out tomorrow. It's time to find out what really happened." I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything we had uncovered. Dimitri, the house, my family's dark past, it all felt like too much. But somewhere deep inside me, there was a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth could set me free. The next morning, Officer Jackson and I drove to the location. The ride felt long, the silence between us heavy with unspoken thoughts. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I knew it wasn't this. As we pulled up to the house, I could feel my heart in my throat. The place was old, abandoned, covered in ivy and overgrowth. It looked like no one had been there for years. The windows were boarded up, and the front door was barely hanging on its hinges. The house stood in silence, like a forgotten relic, holding secrets that were never meant to be found. I turned to Officer Jackson, who gave me a reassuring nod. "This is it," she said, her voice low. "Are you ready?" I wasn't sure, but I had to be. "Let's do this," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging in my chest. Together, we stepped out of the car and walked toward the house. It was time to uncover the truth. It was time to face whatever had been buried in the past. I stood at the entrance of the old house, my heart pounding in my chest as the wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Officer Jackson stood beside me, her eyes scanning the darkened interior. We were about to go inside, to confront whatever secrets lay hidden within these decaying walls, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it. There was no turning back now. The truth was here, waiting for us to find it. I had never seen a place so abandoned, so forgotten. The house looked like it had been left to rot for years, yet there was something about it that drew me in. A part of me wanted to turn around, to run back to the safety of the life I had begun to build. But another part, the part that had endured so much already, knew that I couldn't turn away from this. This was my history, my family's history, and no matter how painful the truth might be, I had to face it. I stepped forward, the door creaking in protest as we pushed it open. The inside was dark, the air thick with dust and the scent of decay. It felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting for us to uncover whatever it had been hiding. "Stay close," Officer Jackson said, her voice steady. "We don't know what we'll find in here. Be careful." I nodded, my eyes scanning the room. The floorboards groaned under our weight as we moved deeper into the house, the walls covered in peeling wallpaper and shattered furniture scattered throughout. It was clear that no one had lived here for a long time. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. We moved slowly, cautiously, as if the house itself might suddenly spring to life and trap us inside. The hallways were narrow and dimly lit, with only a few beams of light breaking through the grime-covered windows. The walls were lined with faded photographs, their faces blurred by time. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as we passed them, as if the eyes of the people in those pictures were following us, judging us. Officer Jackson paused in front of a door at the end of the hallway, her hand resting on the handle. "This is it," she said softly. "Are you ready?" I wasn't sure if I was ever going to be ready, but I knew that I had come this far, and there was no turning back now. I nodded, my throat tight. "Let's go." She opened the door, and we stepped into a small, dimly lit room. It was sparse, almost empty, except for a few old chairs and a table pushed against the far wall. But what caught my attention was the large wooden chest in the corner of the room. It was old, covered in dust, and locked shut. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at it, knowing that whatever was inside was a part of the story I had been trying to unravel. I walked over to the chest, my fingers trembling as I touched the cool wood. "What's in there?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Officer Jackson stepped beside me, her eyes narrowing as she examined the chest. "I don't know," she said, her voice low, "but I think we're about to find out." She reached down, pulling out a small key from her pocket, and inserted it into the lock. The sound of the lock clicking open echoed through the room, sending a chill down my spine. The chest creaked as she lifted the lid, revealing a stack of old papers, yellowed with age. I felt a lump form in my throat as I realized what we were looking at. These were the answers. These were the pieces of my family's past, the answers I had been searching for. Officer Jackson reached in, carefully lifting the papers from the chest. "Let's see what we've got," she said, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. She began sorting through the papers, her eyes scanning each one quickly. "These are old financial records," she said after a moment. "Looks like they're tied to your family's business dealings, but there's something else here." I watched as she pulled out a faded letter, its edges worn and fragile. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the text. As she read, her expression changed, her face tightening with concern. "Maya," she said slowly, her voice filled with unease. "This letter, it's from your mother." I felt my breath catch in my chest. My mother. The letter felt like a thread reaching out from the past, connecting me to her in a way I hadn't expected. "What does it say?" I asked, my voice trembling. Officer Jackson looked at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. "It's about Dimitri," she said softly. "It seems like he was involved in something dangerous. Your mother, she was trying to protect you." I felt a cold wave of shock wash over me. My mother had known about Dimitri. She had known about everything. "What happened?" I asked, barely able to speak. Officer Jackson didn't answer right away. She carefully folded the letter back up and placed it in the chest. "We need to keep going," she said, her voice steady. "We can't stop now. We're getting closer, but there's more to uncover." I nodded, though my mind was racing. My mother, Dimitri, the dark secrets they had hidden. I was finally starting to understand the truth, but it felt like it was too much to bear. There was more to this than I had ever imagined. And no matter how hard it got, I couldn't stop now. I had to keep going, keep digging until I knew everything. The past had been buried for so long, but it was time to bring it into the light. Whatever the cost. I never expected to find myself here, standing in the middle of an investigation that was unraveling more than just secrets. The past few weeks had been a blur of paperwork, long nights, and more questions than answers. I had thought I understood the danger, but now, as I stood in front of the old house, with Dimitri's name looming over everything, it was clear that the danger was closer than I had ever imagined. Officer Jackson had been right. This wasn't just about finding out who Dimitri was. It was about understanding what my family had been involved in. It was about facing the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The walls of the house were crumbling, and as we moved through the darkened rooms, the musty smell of decay filled the air. The silence in the house was suffocating, broken only by our footsteps. Each room we entered seemed to hold more weight, more secrets. I had always believed that once the truth came out, things would get easier. But with every step, every new discovery, I realized how wrong I had been. The weight of my family's involvement in something so much darker than I had ever imagined was crushing. I thought I was ready for the truth, but it was harder than I ever expected. Officer Jackson had led me down into the basement, a place that felt colder than the rest of the house. The air here was damp, the floor covered in dust, and the walls were lined with old shelves filled with boxes. The dim light from our flashlights barely cut through the darkness. "This is where we found the files," Officer Jackson said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "There's something down here, Maya. Something big." I nodded, my heart racing. I had felt it too, the sense of something hidden, something that had been waiting for me to find it. I walked toward the shelf, my fingers brushing the old boxes. As I opened the first one, my stomach twisted. Inside were old papers, faded and fragile. My mother's handwriting was on some of them, and I could barely bring myself to read it. It was like a part of her I hadn't known was exposed, her involvement in something I couldn't understand. "This is it," Officer Jackson said, her voice filled with the weight of the moment. "These documents connect your family to the criminal network Dimitri was a part of." I didn't know what to say. I could feel the blood draining from my face. My family, connected to criminals. The thought made my head spin. I had never imagined anything like this. "But it doesn't make sense," I whispered, my voice shaky. "Why would my mom be involved in something like this? She was always so protective of me." Officer Jackson sighed, setting down the box she had been holding. "Maya, people do things for reasons we can't always understand. But the truth is, your family wasn't just a victim in this. They were a part of it. Your mother, Dimitri, there's a lot we don't know yet, but we're getting closer." I felt the walls close in around me. The weight of it all was suffocating. I had never asked for any of this. I had never wanted to know that my mother had been involved in something so dangerous. But I couldn't turn away from it. I had come this far, and there was no going back. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "What do we do with this?" Officer Jackson looked at me, her expression firm. "We keep going," she said simply. "We have to keep digging. We need to find out everything. Why your mother was involved, how Dimitri fits into this, and what the hell happened to your family. This isn't just about uncovering secrets. This is about justice, Maya. And it's about making sure nothing like this ever happens again." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was ready for what was to come. The fear was still there, but something else was growing inside me, a quiet resolve. I didn't know what the next step would be, but I couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. I had to know the full story. I had to understand why my family had been involved in all of this. why Dimitri had been connected to it, and why it had all been hidden for so long. The truth was finally coming to light, but there was still so much left to uncover. Officer Jackson helped me carry the boxes back upstairs, the weight of the files feeling heavier with every step. We set them down in the living room, and I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Maya," Officer Jackson said, looking at me with concern, "we're getting closer, but I need you to be ready for what comes next. This isn't going to be easy." "I'm ready," I said, even though I wasn't sure if I was. But I couldn't back out now. The truth was close. I could feel it, and no matter how painful it was, I was going to face it head on. I had to, because this wasn't just about uncovering the past. It was about making sure the future was different, making sure that whatever happened next, it wouldn't be like what had happened to me. The past had tried to control me for too long, but not anymore. I was in control now, and I was going to find out everything, no matter the cost. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The air in the house felt thick, heavy with the kind of tension I hadn't felt in a long time. We were getting closer, but the deeper we dug, the more the danger seemed to grow. The truth about my family, about Dimitri, was coming to light, but it wasn't the kind of truth that would set me free. It was a truth that would chain me to the past, whether I was ready for it or not. Officer Jackson and I had spent the last few days piecing together the last bits of the puzzle, and each discovery only led to more questions. The house we had uncovered, the documents, the photographs, they were all pointing to a single, unavoidable fact. Dimitri wasn't just some figure in my past. He was the key to everything. The name that had haunted me for so long now made sense, but understanding it only raised more questions. Why had my mother been involved? What role had Dimitri played in her life? And what had he done to make her so afraid? These were questions I knew I had to answer. I was standing on the edge of something huge, and no matter how much I wanted to retreat, I knew I had to keep going. There was no going back now. Officer Jackson and I sat at the small table in the safe house, the flickering light from a nearby lamp casting long shadows across the room. The files were spread out in front of us, the papers so worn and fragile they could crumble under the weight of the truth they carried. "This is it," Officer Jackson said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "We've reached the end of the line. The last piece of the puzzle is right here." I leaned forward, my fingers trembling as I reached for the folder she had placed in front of me. I knew what it contained before I even opened it. More documents, more ties to Dimitri, and a connection to my family that I hadn't even begun to understand. As I flipped through the papers, my eyes landed on a name that made my stomach drop. My mother's name. It was in a legal document, a contract, something that looked official. The words blurred as my mind raced to keep up. "What is this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Officer Jackson's eyes narrowed as she studied the document. "This is the key. This contract shows that your mother was involved with Dimitri, not just as a passive participant, but as an active player in whatever scheme was going on." I felt my heart sink. This wasn't just about Dimitri anymore. This was about my mother, the woman I had once believed to be my protector, the woman who had shielded me from so much of the world's cruelty. How could she have been involved in something like this? How could she have betrayed me like this? "What did she do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Officer Jackson didn't answer right away. She scanned the document again, then slowly looked up at me. "I don't know yet, Maya," she said, "but I think we're about to find out. This contract is a legal agreement between your mother and Dimitri, and it's tied to the criminal organization we've been tracking. There's no way to sugarcoat this. Your family was involved in something dangerous, something criminal." My breath caught in my throat. This was it. This was the moment I had been both dreading and longing for. The truth. It had always been there, waiting for me to discover it, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to see my mother in this light. But I had to. There was no turning back now. Officer Jackson placed a hand on the table, her voice firm. "We need to find out exactly what your mother was involved in. Dimitri is a key player in all of this. And he's not the only one. There are others. People who need to be held accountable for what they've done." I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of the truth that was unfolding before me. I had always wondered who I really was, where I came from. Now, I knew the answer. But it wasn't the answer I had hoped for. It was the answer that shattered everything I thought I knew. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Betrayal? Confusion? They all swirled inside me, crashing into each other. I had been just a child, kept in the dark, unaware of the forces at play behind the scenes. And now, I was being forced to confront the reality of my family's choices. "I'm scared," I said, my voice breaking. Officer Jackson's expression softened, and she reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "I know you are, Maya, but you're not alone in this. We're going to get through this together." I nodded, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. I wanted to scream, to let the pain out, but I couldn't. I had spent so long building walls, keeping everything inside. But now, the walls were crumbling, and I had no choice but to face everything that had been hidden. I looked down at the contract again, the words blurring in my vision. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice quiet. Officer Jackson stood up, pulling the papers together. "We take this to the next step," she said. "We get the authorities involved. We can't let this go any longer. But we're not doing it without you. You're part of this, Maya. You need to be the one to decide what happens next." I stood up slowly, my knees weak, and looked at the papers one more time. My mother's name. Dimitri's name. The words on the paper felt like a weight, like they were pulling me down into a darkness I wasn't sure I could escape. But I had to. I had no other choice. I had to face the truth, no matter how hard it was. And no matter what happened next, I would do it. For my mother, for me, and for the future I had yet to discover. I felt the weight of the moment like a heavy stone pressing against my chest. The truth had finally started to surface, but now that I knew it, I wasn't sure how to handle it. Officer Jackson had given me the space I needed, but now that the truth about my family's involvement with Dimitri was out in the open, there was nowhere to hide. I had hoped that uncovering the past would bring relief, but all it brought was more fear, more uncertainty. Each piece of the puzzle felt like a jagged edge that scraped away at the remnants of the life I had known. Officer Jackson and I stood together in the safe house, staring at the file in front of us. The document that had started this whole chain of events was now in our hands. My mother's name, Dimitri's name, the connections that tied them together, it was all right there, in black and white. But what did it mean? What did it all lead to? I had already learned too much. The idea that my mother had been involved in something so dangerous, so dark, was almost impossible to comprehend. I wanted to believe she was a victim, that she had been caught up in something beyond her control, but the truth was more complicated than that. Dimitri had been a part of it, and now I was entangled in it all, whether I wanted to be or not. "Maya," Officer Jackson said, breaking the silence that had hung between us. "I know this is a lot to process, but we need to think about what comes next. We've uncovered a lot, but we still don't know the full story. Dimitri is still out there, and there are people who are going to want to keep this quiet." I felt the cold chill of fear creep up my spine. It wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about now. It was about what Dimitri and the others would do to keep their secrets buried. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We move forward," she replied firmly. "We take this to the authorities. We make sure it doesn't get swept under the rug." I nodded, my stomach churning with a mixture of dread and determination. I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to confront the people who had been pulling the strings behind my family's life. But I couldn't walk away. I couldn't let this go. Not now. Not after everything I had learned. Officer Jackson placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've come this far, Maya. You're not alone in this. We're going to do this together." She smiled softly, but there was a hardness in her eyes. She knew what was at stake. I knew too. The truth wasn't just dangerous for me. It was dangerous for anyone who got too close. The thought of facing Dimitri, of confronting the man who had been a part of my family's dark history, filled me with terror. But I couldn't back down. I had to know everything. I had to find out what had happened to my mother, why she had made the choices she did, and what role Dimitri played in all of it. Officer Jackson and I spent the next few days preparing. We contacted the authorities, working with a team of investigators to piece together the evidence and build a case. Each new discovery was like a blow to the chest. There were more people involved than I had realized. People who had used my family's name, my mother's name, to cover their tracks and further their own twisted agendas. The deeper we dug, the more dangerous it became. I knew we couldn't stop now. We were in too deep, but there was no turning back. Dimitri's name was everywhere. His influence reached far beyond what I could have imagined. The truth was darker than I had ever expected. But in the midst of all the chaos, I knew I had to push forward. I had to face the fear, face the danger, and face the past that had been hidden from me for so long. The moment of reckoning was coming. I didn't know what the final outcome would be, but I knew it was up to me to uncover the full truth. The investigation moved forward, but the more we learned, the more complicated everything became. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of future awaited me after all of this. What kind of life could I build knowing the truth? And what would happen to Dimitri and the others who had been a part of this dark world? Would they ever be brought to justice? Or would the cycle of deceit and manipulation continue, like it always had? The answers seemed out of reach, but I couldn't stop looking for them. The weight of the past, the weight of my family's secrets, was pressing down on me, but I wasn't backing down. I would see this through, no matter the cost. I stood at the edge of the darkened alley, the cold wind biting at my skin, as I watched the shadows of figures moving in and out of the building ahead. This was it, the final step. Officer Jackson had been right all along. We had reached the point where the truth couldn't be hidden any longer. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was about to happen, but I knew that there was no turning back. My past, my family's dark secrets, all of it had led me here. We had uncovered so much, but we still hadn't confronted the biggest piece of the puzzle. Dimitri, the man who had shaped my life in ways I hadn't even realized until now. Officer Jackson stood beside me, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "You okay?" she asked, her voice steady but full of concern. I nodded, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "I think so, but I don't know what to expect." She gave me a reassuring look, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "We're in this together, Maya. Whatever happens, we'll face it head on." I exhaled, trying to steady myself. This was it, the final confrontation. The man who had been a shadow in my life for so long was within reach. And I had to know the truth about him, about my family, about everything. We walked into the building, the door creaking as we pushed it open. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of dust and stale air. My senses were on high alert, every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet making my heart race. We reached the end of the hallway and stopped outside a door. It was solid, heavy, and the faint sound of muffled voices could be heard from the other side. Dimitri was in there, I was sure of it. I had never felt more uncertain of what I was about to face. But it was now or never. Officer Jackson turned to me, her eyes meeting mine. "You ready?" I nodded, though my mind was racing. As ready as I'll ever be. With a swift motion, she opened the door. The room was dim, lit only by a few scattered lamps casting shadows on the walls. And there he was, Dimitri, sitting at the far side of the room, his back to us, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't seem surprised to see us. In fact, he looked almost bored. He turned his head slightly, his cold, calculating eyes locking onto mine. "Maya," he said, his voice smooth, but with an edge that sent a chill down my spine. "I wondered when you'd show up." Officer Jackson stepped forward, her presence unwavering. "Dimitri," she said, her voice firm, "we need answers. And you're going to give them to us." Dimitri raised an eyebrow, amused by her tone. "Answers?" he repeated, leaning back in his chair. "What answers could I possibly give you, officer? I'm just a businessman." His words sent a wave of anger through me, but I kept my composure. This wasn't about him. It was about uncovering the truth. "You've been hiding things, Dimitri," I said, stepping forward, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "You've been hiding things about my family, about what my mother was involved in, and you need to explain it all." Dimitri chuckled, the sound echoing in the silence. "Your mother?" he said, his tone mocking. "You really don't understand, do you? It's not just about your mother, Maya. It's about everything. The money, the deals, the power. Your family was a part of something bigger. Something much bigger than you could ever imagine." His words hit me like a slap in the face. The weight of his words made my stomach churn. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice breaking through the shock. Dimitri leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with something dark. "Your family was the key to everything. They made choices that affected more than just you. More than just your mother. This wasn't just some small-time deal. This was big. Your mother was involved in something she couldn't escape." His words made my mind spin. I felt like I was losing control, like everything I had known about my family was unraveling before me. But I had to keep going. I had to know the truth. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me the truth about all of this?" Dimitri stood up slowly, his movements measured. "Because you weren't supposed to know, Maya. You weren't supposed to get involved. Your family made sure you were kept in the dark. They wanted you to stay safe. But the truth always comes out, eventually. I felt like I was drowning in the weight of his words, each one a revelation I wasn't ready to hear. But I had to hear it. I had to know the full story, no matter how painful. Dimitri took a step closer, his presence filling the room. You think you're just a victim in all of this, he said, his voice low and menacing. But you're not. You're part of it, whether you like it or not. The words struck me harder than I expected. I had always seen myself as an innocent bystander in my family's secrets. But Dimitri was right. I wasn't just an innocent victim. I was part of this, and I had to face it. Officer Jackson stepped in, her voice sharp. That's enough, Dimitri, she said, her eyes cold. You've said enough. Dimitri smirked, but didn't push back. He knew the game was up. I turned away from him, trying to make sense of everything I had just heard. My mind was spinning, the pieces of my family's past falling into place. But it wasn't the relief I had hoped for. It was more like a burden, one I didn't know if I could carry. But I had to. I had to carry it, because the truth had already found its way to me, and there was no escaping it now. It was time to face the consequences. Time to face my family's legacy, for better or worse. I hadn't realized how deep it went until that moment. The room was heavy with silence after Dimitri had said those words. The way he spoke, so calmly, as if the weight of everything he was admitting didn't faze him, made my skin crawl. He had been part of my family's life in ways I couldn't have imagined, and now I was faced with the truth. I was part of it too, whether I liked it or not. The dark world my mother had been tangled up in was now mine to bear. I turned my back to Dimitri, trying to push his words from my mind, but they clung to me like a stain I couldn't scrub away. Officer Jackson stood beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder, a silent reassurance in the chaos of my thoughts. You don't have to carry this alone, Maya, she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm I could see brewing inside me. You've done nothing wrong. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my mind. It wasn't that simple. My family had been involved in things I couldn't even begin to understand, and now I was right in the middle of it all. Everything I thought I knew had been shattered in an instant. I don't even know what to think anymore, I whispered, my voice trembling. Officer Jackson turned me around, her eyes searching mine. You don't need to think about it all at once. We'll take it one step at a time. We're still gathering the evidence, but we're not stopping. And we'll make sure you're safe. That's the priority. She paused before adding. But we need you to make a choice, Maya. What happens next is up to you. I swallowed hard, staring at the floor. I had always prided myself on being independent, on keeping my distance from people, especially from the chaos that had followed my family's footsteps. But now, for the first time, I realized I had to choose. There was no running anymore. I couldn't hide from the truth, not when it was this close, not when it was part of me. I nodded slowly, the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me. I'm ready, I said, the words barely audible, but they felt like a declaration. The silence in the room felt thick, like it was waiting for me to change everything with those few words. Dimitri's cold, emotionless gaze was still on me as I turned toward him. I wasn't sure what I expected from him, but I knew he wasn't going to make it easy. He wasn't the type to show any remorse. What happens now? I asked, my voice firmer than before. Dimitri didn't answer right away. He stood there for a moment, his face unreadable. Then finally, he spoke. You can't stop this. None of you can. My people are too powerful. Your family was always going to be a part of this, Maya. You think you can just walk away? His words were sharp, like knives designed to rattle me, but I wasn't going to let him. I'm not walking away, I said, my voice steady now, a strength rising up in me I hadn't felt before. But I'm not letting you control me either. Dimitri's lips curled into a smirk. You think this is some simple game? You're already in it, Maya. You've been in it since the day you were born. The words hit me hard, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me any longer. The truth had already been laid bare, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I don't care what you think, I said, my voice cold now. I'm not part of your game. I'm going to make sure the truth gets out, no matter what. Officer Jackson stepped forward, her presence firm and unyielding. That's enough, Dimitri. You're not going to intimidate her anymore. We're taking this to the authorities. You've made your move, and now you're going to face the consequences. Dimitri didn't say anything, but his eyes narrowed, his face darkening with fury. I didn't flinch. The fear that had held me captive for so long was gone. Now, it was replaced by a sense of purpose. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was part of this fight, and I was going to see it through to the end. Dimitri turned his back on us, walking toward the window, his posture stiff and full of arrogance. "You really think this is going to change anything?" he asked, his voice low, almost to himself. "You think you can bring me down? You're nothing but a pawn." His words were meant to cut, to make me doubt myself, but they didn't. Not anymore. I had come too far. "I'm not your pawn," I said firmly. "And I'm not backing down." Officer Jackson nodded, her eyes filled with approval. "We're done here," she said, her tone final. Dimitri didn't respond. He just stood there, staring out the window, the silence in the room thick with unspoken tension. We didn't need him to say anything else. The time for his manipulation was over. As we turned to leave, I felt a surge of determination. We were going to get this right. Dimitri's world, the one that had controlled my family for so long, was finally starting to crumble, and I was going to make sure it stayed. That way, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was part of something much bigger now, something that would bring the truth to light. As we walked out of the building, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past beginning to lift. This was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long and dangerous, but I was ready. The truth was in my hands now, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. I had never been so sure of anything in my life. Officer Jackson and I had come a long way, but this was the turning point. Dimitri, the man who had haunted my every thought, was finally being exposed for the truth of what he was. And yet, even with all the pieces in place, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. Dimitri's world was crumbling, but I knew that this wasn't over. The higher you climbed, the harder you fell, and Dimitri's fall would be anything but quiet. He wasn't going down without a fight. It was late, the kind of late where the world seemed to slow down, and I was sitting in a small room at the safe house, going over everything we had uncovered. I looked at the stack of documents in front of me, financial records, names of associates, connections to powerful people. The truth about my family, about my mother's involvement in the criminal network, it was all there. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't have the full picture. There were things Dimitri had said that didn't add up, things that were still lurking just out of reach. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my eyes. This wasn't supposed to be my life. A few weeks ago, I had been a normal teenager, living in the shadows of my family's secrets, unaware of the dangers that lurked just beneath the surface. Now, I was caught up in a tangled web of betrayal, crime, and lies. I hadn't asked for this, but somehow, I had become a part of it. The weight of it all pressed on me. It wasn't just about exposing Dimitri anymore. It was about making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else, that his influence wouldn't spread any further. Officer Jackson knocked on the door, pulling me from my thoughts. "Maya, we've got something," she said, her voice steady. But I could hear the urgency in her tone. I stood up immediately, my heart racing. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "We've got a lead," she replied, holding up a file. "We tracked one of Dimitri's associates. He's been running a network of illegal activities through several businesses, and we think we've found a way to tie him directly to your mother's involvement." I felt my stomach flip. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Officer Jackson said, "that we have a chance to hit him where it hurts. If we can get to his money, his connections, we can break this wide open." She handed me the file, and I started to flip through it. Inside were reports on various businesses linked to Dimitri, laundromats, real estate, and other ventures that seemed to be fronts for much more. The evidence was damning. "How are we going to take him down?" I asked, my mind racing. "We need to move fast," she said, her eyes sharp. "Dimitri knows we're getting closer. He's not going to sit back and let this happen without retaliating. He'll do whatever it takes to protect himself. That's why we have to be ready for anything." I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I held the file. This was it. The moment I had been working toward. We had the evidence. We had the truth. Now, all we had to do was make sure Dimitri was held accountable. But the road ahead was dangerous. There was no telling what lengths Dimitri would go to in order to protect his empire. He had made it clear that he didn't care about who got hurt. He would do anything to maintain control. "What do we do next?" I asked, looking at Officer Jackson. She looked at me with a steady gaze, but I could see the weight of the situation in her eyes. "We move forward, Maya. We bring this to the authorities. We've got everything we need to take him down." but we need to act fast. The urgency in her voice made my heart race. And if he tries to stop us? I asked, suddenly feeling the gravity of the situation. If he tries to stop us, Officer Jackson said, her tone firm, we'll stop him first. We spent the next few hours strategizing, preparing for the confrontation that was about to take place. We were going to work with the authorities, bringing everything we had uncovered to light. But I knew that even if we had the law on our side, we would be up against a man who wasn't afraid to fight dirty. I wasn't naive enough to think that Dimitri would go down without a fight. He would try everything in his power to escape, to bury the truth. And that terrified me. But it also gave me the strength to push forward. I had already lost so much to him, to the darkness that had been hidden from me for so long. I wasn't going to let him take any more. The next morning, we were ready. The plan was set. The authorities were prepared to move in on Dimitri's businesses, to dismantle the network that had been built on lies and crime. But as we headed out, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was a sense of unease in the air, like the calm before a storm. I looked at Officer Jackson, who was focused, determined. Do you think we'll get him? I asked, my voice quiet. She turned to me, her expression hard. We're going to get him, Maya, she said, her voice unwavering. But remember, no matter what happens, we're doing the right thing. I nodded, the weight of her words settling deep inside me. I was about to face Dimitri one last time. And this time, I wasn't backing down. We were going to expose the truth, and nothing could stop us. I couldn't help but feel the weight of what was coming. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. Papers, secrets, revelations that had turned my world upside down. But now, everything had led to this moment. I was about to face Dimitri and the truth about everything that had been hidden for so long. As Officer Jackson and I prepared for the final push to expose the criminal network Dimitri was a part of, the tension in the air was palpable. We had the evidence, we had the truth, but there was still so much at risk. Dimitri was dangerous. I had learned that much. He had manipulated my family, my mother, for years, and now that the truth was finally coming to light, I could feel the storm brewing. He wouldn't go down without a fight. The plan was in place. The authorities were ready to move in. Dimitri's businesses were set to be raided, the evidence of his involvement in organized crime about to be laid bare. But as I sat in the car, looking at the building we were about to enter, I could feel my nerves tightening. My heart was racing. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was personal. Officer Jackson looked over at me, her expression unreadable, but her presence steady. She was used to this. She had been part of this world for a long time, but for me, this was new. Everything about this situation felt like a world I didn't belong in. You good? Officer Jackson asked, her voice calm, but I could hear the underlying concern. I nodded, trying to steady my breath. Yeah, I said, but I wasn't sure I meant it. My mind was still racing with everything we had uncovered, everything I had learned about my mother's past, about Dimitri, about my own role in it all. I had never thought I would be part of something so dark. I never imagined the truth about my family would lead me to this point. Dimitri had controlled everything, and now I was trying to take that control back. But I wasn't just taking on Dimitri anymore. I was facing everything he represented. The lies, the manipulation, the people who had been involved in this dangerous world for so long. And as much as I wanted to bring everything to an end, I couldn't ignore the fear that still gripped me. What if we failed? What if the people behind Dimitri found a way to silence us? But I couldn't back down now. We had come this far. The truth was too important. Dimitri had made his move, and now it was our turn. We stepped out of the car and made our way toward the entrance of the building. I could feel my hands trembling as we approached. This wasn't just a raid. This was the culmination of everything I had learned in the past few weeks. It was the moment that would define everything that had happened before. Officer Jackson led the way, her steps sure, her focus unwavering. I followed closely behind, trying to steady myself, but every step felt like a weight pressing down on me. We reached the door, and Officer Jackson turned the handle, pushing it open. Inside, the air was thick with the tension of what we were about to do. The room was dimly lit, and the sound of voices echoed from deeper within. Dimitri was here, and so were the people who had been working with him. We had to be careful. We had to move fast. Officer Jackson signaled for the team to move in, and we split up, each of us taking a different part of the building. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins as we moved. This was it. We were going to take him down. I reached the back of the building, my eyes scanning every corner, every doorway. Dimitri wasn't here yet, but I knew it wouldn't be long before he showed up. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of footsteps echoing through the hall. I was on edge, waiting for the moment when everything would explode. And then, I heard it. A door opened, and I turned quickly, my heart skipping a beat. Dimitri. He stood at the far end of the hallway, his expression unreadable. He didn't seem surprised to see us. In fact, he looked almost amused. "I knew you would come for me," he said, his voice cold and detached. "You really think you can stop this?" His words sent a chill down my spine, but I stood my ground. "It's over, Dimitri," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "You're done." Dimitri didn't move, his gaze never leaving mine. "You think this is going to change anything? You think you can just walk in here and take me down? You've underestimated me, Maya. You've always underestimated me." His words were like daggers, but I wasn't going to let them get to me. "I'm not underestimating anything," I said, my voice firm. "This ends now." Officer Jackson appeared behind me, her eyes sharp. "This is your last chance, Dimitri," she said, her voice cold. "You can surrender now, or we can do this the hard way." Dimitri smirked, but there was something different in his eyes now. "You really think you've won? This isn't the end for me. It's just the beginning." And with that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows. The sound of his footsteps faded as we moved forward, ready to finish what we had started. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But we were closer than we had ever been. And this time, there would be no escape for Dimitri. I didn't know what to expect when we entered the final phase of the operation. We had all the pieces, the evidence, the witnesses, the connections, but there was still something that gnawed at me. Dimitri wasn't the only one involved in this twisted world. There were others, and some of them might be closer than we realized. But now was the moment we had been working toward. The authorities had moved in on Dimitri's assets, raiding his properties and businesses, unraveling the network that had sustained him for so long. But even with everything set into motion, I couldn't shake the sense of uncertainty that lingered. Dimitri had a way of getting away from the law. He had done it before. And this time, the stakes were higher than ever. It had been a few days since the confrontation in the building. The silence in the safe house felt heavier with each passing hour, and despite the progress we were making, it was hard to ignore the tension. Every phone call, every text message, every knock on the door seemed to carry the weight of what was at stake. It wasn't just about putting an end to Dimitri's reign. It was about protecting the people who had been caught in his web, the people who would be left to pick up the pieces after everything was over. Officer Jackson had been working nonstop, coordinating with the investigators, and each day, we received new updates. Dimitri's empire was crumbling, but he wasn't going down quietly. That much was clear. We were working on tightening the noose, but I couldn't help but wonder if Dimitri had one last trick up his sleeve. He had always been one step ahead, even when we thought we had him cornered. That night, I found myself staring at my phone, waiting for another update, another piece of the puzzle to fall into place. The room was quiet, but my mind was anything but. I couldn't sleep. I hadn't been able to for days. The weight of everything was too much. I was a part of this now. There was no turning back. And despite everything I had learned, everything we had uncovered, I still didn't know how this would end. I was afraid that when the dust settled, I wouldn't recognize the world around me. The knock at the door startled me, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Officer Jackson. She stepped into the room, her face tense. "Maya, we need to move. Now." My heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice tight. "Dimitri's people, some of them have gone underground. We've got a lead on one of his associates. We need to act fast before they can regroup or vanish." She explained quickly, urgency in her voice. "We can't let them escape." The sense of urgency washed over me, and I stood up, my legs shaky but steady enough to move. "I'm ready," I said, the words feeling like they carried more weight than they ever had before. I followed Officer Jackson to the car, my mind racing. We had to make sure Dimitri couldn't slip away. He couldn't be allowed to start over, to continue with his plans. The world had already suffered enough because of him. Officer Jackson drove with purpose, her eyes fixed on the road, but I could tell she was just as worried as I was. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. Dimitri had been running for a long time, and we weren't sure where he would go next. We arrived at the location, a small, unassuming warehouse on the edge of town. It was dark, almost deserted, and for a moment, I thought maybe this was some kind of trap. But Officer Jackson's eyes told me it wasn't. She was calm, controlled, and determined. This was where we would end this. We slipped inside, the building quiet except for the sound of our footsteps echoing off the walls. The air was thick with dust, the scent of oil and metal lingering in the air. It felt like walking into the mouth of a monster, but we couldn't stop now. We were close. We moved quickly, our steps deliberate and careful. The tension was palpable, the weight of everything coming to a head. Each step felt like it might be our last, but we didn't back down. Not now. Not when we were this close. We reached the back of the warehouse, where the sounds of murmuring voices could be heard from the other side of a thin wall. Officer Jackson motioned for me to stay low. As we approached the door, "This is it," she whispered. "We go in on my signal." I nodded, my heart racing. We had been preparing for this moment for days, but I still wasn't ready. Not completely. "On three," she said. 1, 2, 3. We burst through the door, and I immediately saw the figures in the room. There were 3 of them, all armed, standing in front of a table stacked with documents and cash. They froze as we entered, and for a brief moment, no one moved. "Put your hands where we can see them," Officer Jackson shouted. The men hesitated, their eyes flicking to the weapons in their hands. I could feel the air thicken, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. Then one of them lunged toward the table, grabbing for a gun, but Officer Jackson was faster. She fired once, hitting the man in the shoulder, and he collapsed to the ground. The other 2 surrendered immediately, dropping their weapons to the floor. "Stay down," Officer Jackson shouted, moving to cuff the men. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, as the men were secured and the truth about Dimitri's operation came into sharper focus. We had them. We had what we needed to bring everything to an end. But even as I breathed a sigh of relief, I knew it wasn't over. Dimitri was still out there. The game wasn't finished yet. I stood in the empty warehouse, the sounds of officers securing the remaining men echoing in my ears. Everything that had led up to this moment, the months of fear, of confusion, of uncovering secrets I never wanted to know, had all come to a head in this one place. Dimitri's network was crumbling, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. I could finally see the light at the end of this dark, twisted tunnel. But there was still one last thing weighing on my mind. Dimitri, the man who had controlled everything for so long. The one who had shaped my family's history and dragged me into his mess. He was still out there, and I knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. Officer Jackson stepped beside me, her expression steady but clearly worn from the intensity of the raid. "We've got them," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the room. "But we still have to find him." I nodded, my mind racing. Dimitri had always been one step ahead, and even with everything we had uncovered, I didn't trust that he would just sit back and let this happen. He would fight back. He always had. The night was still young, but I could feel the weight of what had just happened start to sink in. My heart was pounding, but there was a strange sense of relief, too. Dimitri's empire was falling apart, and I was finally free from the grip it had held on me for so long. The past few days had been a blur, a whirlwind of documents, arrests, and phone calls. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, but there was still so much left to do. So many people still had to be held accountable for what they'd done. "What happens now?" I asked Officer Jackson, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned to me, her gaze filled with something between concern and determination. "We finish this, Maya. We make sure Dimitri can't hurt anyone else. We make sure this never happens again." Her words felt like a promise, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe in it. I didn't have to be part of this world anymore. It wasn't my burden to carry. I had already lost so much, but I was still standing, still breathing. And for the first time, I had control of my own story. The sound of a car pulling up outside interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see the familiar face of a detective from the task force. He stepped inside, his face grim. "We've located him," he said. My heart skipped a beat. Dimitri was close. "Where?" I asked, my voice tight with anticipation. The detective didn't answer immediately, but I could see the weight of the situation in his eyes. "We've got a lead. He's trying to flee the city. We don't have much time." The tension in the room thickened, but I could feel the urgency growing. Dimitri was running, but we were right behind him. "Let's go." I said, my voice sharp. Officer Jackson and I exchanged a look, both of us knowing that this was it. This was the moment we had been preparing for. Dimitri's time was running out. We got into the car and sped off toward the location. The city passed by in a blur, the lights of the buildings and streets flashing through the window. The closer we got to Dimitri, the faster my heart pounded. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about justice. It was about taking back what had been stolen from me, from my family. As we arrived at the location, I saw Dimitri's car parked outside a rundown building. He wasn't here yet, but he was close. I could feel it. He's here, Officer Jackson said, her voice low but firm. This is it. We go in now. The team moved in quickly, but there was no sign of Dimitri inside the building. It was dark, abandoned, and eerily quiet. We searched room by room, the silence pressing in on us. And then, I heard it. The sound of footsteps. I froze, my body tense with anticipation. Dimitri was here. We found him at the back of the building, a small, dimly lit room with a single chair in the center. He was standing in the corner, his back to us, as if he had been waiting. The moment we stepped inside, he turned around slowly, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. You think you've won? He said, his voice cold, filled with contempt. You've always been too naive, Maya. I stepped forward, my hands clenched at my sides. It's over, Dimitri, I said, my voice steady. You're done. Dimitri laughed softly, as if my words were meaningless. You really think you can stop this? You don't even know half of it. You're just a pawn, Maya. Always have been. His words hit me like a blow, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't that person anymore. I'm not a pawn, Dimitri, I said, my voice stronger now, more certain than I had ever been. I'm done being a part of your game. Dimitri's smirk faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. He took a step back, his hand reaching for something in his coat pocket. You have no idea what you're dealing with, he said, his voice low. I didn't give him a chance to move further. In one swift motion, Officer Jackson lunged forward, securing him in a hold that rendered him helpless. It's over, she said, her voice filled with finality. Dimitri struggled briefly, but it was clear he knew. The game was up. The law had finally caught up to him. The operation to bring him down had been successful. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Dimitri was going to face the consequences of his actions, and my family's dark past was no longer going to control me. I was free, and as we led Dimitri out of the building, I realized that the past didn't define me anymore. I was ready to move forward, to rebuild the life I had lost. The weight that had been hanging over me for so long had finally lifted. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe in the future I was going to create. For the first time, I was truly free.